My name is Gregory Allen. I was born in Seattle, Washington in 1951. Was born in West Seattle, High Point, lived in High Point till I was 3 years old. In 1953, our family moved into the central area. We lived on 26 between Marion and Columbia. And we lived there for 3 or 4 years of my life, and then we ended up moving to 29th, right off of Cherry, and eventually to 33rd between Jefferson and Terrace. My family, my mother was born in Yakima, Washington, my father in Toppenish, which is 30 miles south of Yakima. They met in 1947, and they married in 1948, and they moved to Seattle and had my oldest brother. And then the next following year, my other brother was born, and then I came in 51. And I have a sister who was born 12 years after me. And that's pretty much our family history there. But like I say, we came up in the central area, and as I knew it, it was a heavenly place. I mean, we had neighbors, we had hundreds of kids and neighbors all around us that to this day, I still know quite a few of them that are still around, that are still living. But we grew up there on 26, and my father worked at Boeing and other odd jobs, did maintenance work at night. My mother eventually went to work for Boeing. And of course, they both went through the layoffs at Boeing, so there was always doubt about how income was going to be maintained. But anyway, I went to Horseman Elementary School, kindergarten to, I think it was third grade. Then we moved, and I ended up going to Leschi till the 6th grade. And there, I had met a lot of friends. The central area is one of those places where you knew everybody from the valley to Yesler Terrace to South End to Holly Park to Rainier Vista. So I had cousins and friends all over the central area and south of there. But at Leschi, I had my first, maybe she was just the second black teacher that I had in 6th grade, Mrs. Franklin. She was very dramatic, and not only dramatic, but she was very aware of black history, and she did all she could to include black Americans in our lives. And I can remember her celebrating Marian Anderson and Mahalia Jackson, and she loved music. She would play music for us. And of course, at that time, I was into music too. I played the trumpet. But life was pretty good in the central area, and we played sports. Of course, Little League, International Little League was the biggest things in our life. During baseball season, of course, there would be anywhere from 10 to 12 teams sponsored by black businesses in the central area. It was called the International Little League, and Isaiah Edwards was the first president at the time when I first started playing. And I started playing when I was 6 years old. Started in the farm system, and we practiced up at TT Minor, played for the Blue Notes. The Blue Notes were, they were, I don't know what they were as far as a business, but that was the farm team that I played for. It ended up turning from the Blue Notes, turned into the Empresses. And eventually, as I got older, I played regular Little League, and but was always around the park, always around all the different people who came from different areas in the central area, that played on different teams. There was the VFWs, the Busy Bees, there was so many different teams, Empresses, local 242 Jets. There were all these teams, and we would all celebrate on Saturday because we'd have games, and everybody would show up at Garfield Park with their uniforms, their new uniforms, and proud to be out there. And this is our experience as black kids. We at that point we hadn't really heard about civil rights, and we weren't brought into the circle as far as discrimination. So what we knew was joy, and we thought we were lucky that nobody had what we had because we were happy, and we did all the things that we thought we wanted to do. In the Central area at the time, like I say, it had so many different functions and things that going on. I remember we were part of the Masonic Temple's drill team, and my father was in the Masonic Temple for a while, and all the kids, different kids from all the different families, we had a drill team, and it was something, it was quite an experience, that it didn't last long. It lasted, I think, maybe a year or two before it fell apart, because a lot of it was predicated on the older kids, teenagers, and as a lot of the teenagers got older, they didn't want to do it. They got into different things, but that was just an example of one of the things that happened here, in the Central area. And of course, we had all the bands and stuff. As we grew older, you had all the bands in the Central area, a lot of them were newly formed, and they were with people who I had went to school with and played with in band. A lot of them started their own groups, from early on, Majestics, the Hills Boys. It was the Hills Brothers, and the Acapulco Gold, and man, I'm drawing a blank now, but there was just tons of musical organizations going on that played at dances, and that kept our community, vital as far as the national scene. They played top soul music that was played on the only radio station at the time. I think we had a couple of them. We had KZAN and KYAC, and these guys would not only produce their own music, but they would play top soul music for dances and things like that kept us up with all the things that were happening around the nation. So when we looked at Soul Train and we saw these kids out there dancing, we saw ourselves too, because we're at our functions doing the same thing. We're partying. Our black community is just like other black communities all across the nation. So anyway, my life, I went to Garfield, and like I said, I played football. That was my sport. I went on and had an opportunity to play at the UW, but I turned that down because at that time, we were introduced to racism and discrimination, and at that time, they had a coach there who was very racist and was not doing black athletes right, and I chose not to go there, which I wish I would have thought about it more, because I wasn't thinking about the power of the alumni being able to graduate from the UW and what that meant as far as future. But I ended up going to Western, and those days, they were wild. I came up in the '60s, smoking weed, doing all the things that we did, and that's life of an 18-year-old, away from home, was quite an experience for me. Of course, at that point, I was into girls and young women, and life was good. Early in life, back up some, when I was 16 years old, I interviewed for a summer job. You had to be 17, but I changed my birth certificate, and I don't know, 50 to 100 people interviewed for the job. They only hired 2 people. Myself and Charles Jackson got jobs with Great Northern Railroad, working as Pullman porter, sleeping car porters that summer, working on the Empire Builder back to Chicago. So that experience for me was a mind blower, a real eye opener for me, because I had never really, up to that point, I had been down the West Coast, I had been to LA, I'd been seeing Watts, but I'd never really seen a ghetto. And the first time I pulling into Chicago, going through Aurora, Illinois, and I standing out on the train on the door there where we get people off, and I was just looking and going past all these ghettos and slums, and it was just an eye opener to me, man. And we got into Chicago, got to the hotel. You know, I was an adventurous, so I went downtown into the Loop, you know, and did some shopping and went to some shops that, you know, that they surely didn't have in Seattle, the type of shops they had in Chicago. But it was quite the experience. In one of my trips there, one of the porters knocked on my door and said, "Hey, you want to go see Sly Stone?" I said, "What?" "Yeah." So they took me to this theater where Sly and the Family Stone were playing. And it's mind blowing. This theater was gigantic. They probably had 3 balconies. It was huge. It was packed. And Sly and Family Stone played for over 2 hours. And I had never seen anything like that in my life. The people, the women, they were dancing in the aisles. They were pulling off their bras and throwing them. It was something that I had never experienced. And in Sly, they tore it up. They tore it up. I'd seen Jimi Hendrix and with the Vanilla Fudge, I had seen them, but I had never seen a rock soul band that had such control over an audience like that. And so when I came back to Seattle, I told everybody, hey, when Sly comes, you gotta see him. You gotta go see him. And Sly, when they came to Seattle, I think they played 40 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. It was so disappointing. In Chicago, man, they played for 2 hours, and when they went off, the last song they were playing was "I Want to Take You Higher," and the place was just explosive. They went off and they brought them back on for an encore, and they walked back on stage. Larry Graham, Sister Rose, Hands, Feet, all them walked back on, and there wasn't a sound except for the audience. They walked back and grabbed the instruments. Sly came out last after they were there, and he faced the audience. He had his hip boots on, with his suede hip boots with his jangles hanging down, and he faced the audience on his bench, and he swung around to the organ, and just like somebody flipped a switch, they went back into "I Want to Take It Higher," like it was just a switch flipped. They didn't miss a beat. It was full blast, and the place exploded. My hairs are coming up on my arm right now thinking about that. And that was a life-altering experience for me. You know, 2 things. You know, I'm back in Chicago. I'm 16 years old. I'm not even old enough to do the job. I'm back there. You know, I'm Pullman porter, sleeping car porter. I'm making money. I just probably had gotten $200 worth of tips on the trip out, you know, and I never had money like that on my own, and so that was a eye opener for me. So when I came back to Seattle, going forward here, you know, of course, you know, we had the civil disturbances, the riots, we had the Stokely came to town. We had all the things that were happening. The Panthers were organizing in Seattle for the second chapter of the Panthers in the Nation, and there was a lot of things going on here. And you know, my father wasn't having any of that as far as revolutionaries at his house. You know, he wasn't going for that. But you know, I was always the type that what I did out in the street, I kept out there. You know, my parents, they did not hold us back. I might be in the Yesler Terrace. I might leave out the house, going down around the corner. I might end up at the Yesler Terrace playing basketball or hanging out with somebody, or down in Washington Park, you know. So that I did and moved like I needed to, but I also had respect for that house, because my father, Phil, he didn't play that, you know. He didn't play that. He was real clear about, you know, when it was your time, you know, you could leave, you know, but right now it's my time, and you go do what. And that's the way a lot of us came up in those days, you know. There's respect for the families, and the fathers were examples of what we wanted to be as men. And some of the examples were good, some were bad, but that was life. But anyway, life went on in the Central area, and you know, the summers of the 60s, the 70s, 71. Oh man, I can remember when Marvin Gaye came out with "What's Going On." Man, I can just remember how lively the city was, the radio stations, everybody. Man, I mean, it was life changing for a lot of people, and you know, to this day, and a lot of people. I heard Smokey Robinson talk about that. That's the number one album of all time in his eyes. And this is Smokey Robinson, who's written thousands of songs and albums. And I could probably agree, because when that album came out, we were really going through manhood and growth, and that got us ready for, you know, what was to come. And you know, and I think as far as the community, I think we all reached out and tried to do what we could as far as living here. I know I moved on, and I ended up on the road from Canada to California to, you know, my fast life. I ended up down in Olympia, you know, in 1975. I ended up getting married and moving to Alaska, and I stayed up there until the 80s and came back to the Central area, came back to Seattle. And at that point, things were good. Right around 79, though, I was introduced to, of course, throughout my casual drug use, you know, was introduced to a lot of things. But one of the things that changed my life, I was introduced to freebase cocaine. And for the next 10 years, you know, I was gone. I was working. Everything I did was towards keeping that habit up. And finally, in 1989, I got clean and sober, and you know, it's been 33 years now since I drank or drug, but that during that period, it was a low point, not only in my life, but drugs were dropped all over the nation. It was systematic, it was planned, and what happened in the Central area was the drugs were dropped here, and it was slowly tore the community apart. Addiction was happening in families. Kids were being isolated and left to their grandparents to raise their kids, and the adults were strung out. They were losing properties, they were losing jobs, they were losing their lives. And what slowly started happening at that period too, we started going into a period when they started seizing a lot of because of the drug trade, because of all the things they put in a law here that would allow them to confiscate houses that were used for drug trade, and they would turn those houses over to the city, and they would be auctioned off. And around that time, the community, the white community, the white people in Seattle wanted to move back into the city. You know, Microsoft was going real strong, and all the Fortune 500 companies were in the area, and they were trying to get back into the city. And the Central area is the closest thing to downtown. So houses that cost parents $30,000, $40,000, now all of a sudden we're going for $400,000, $500,000. Today, some of those houses, those same houses, are $1 million to even start talking about buying a house in the Central area today. So through that, the community was spread out. They were sent out to places like Renton, where when we were kids, we couldn't even go out to Renton. You go out to Renton, they call you a nigger, and they tell you they'd run you out of there. and out in places like Auburn and Kent, Tukwila. Those places were places that weren't accessible to us back then, but now that's where they had to move the residents as they started moving them out of the central area. And today, there's some people that still maintain their properties. Some people held on, but the majority of the black community has been disassembled. There's very few black businesses, black-owned businesses. There's a few coming back, but a lot of them are African-owned or businesses that aren't from the original black community in Seattle. So what we have is a satellite community now of black folks that grew up in the central area that live anywhere from Tacoma to North End, Northgate, to Everett, Tukwila, Renton, and that has changed everything as far as our ability to come together as a community and get things done. And in the past, the churches are even today struggling. A few of them have moved out of the central area to accommodate some of the congregation that doesn't live in the central area anymore. And some of them are holding on, doing better than others. But that's where the community has always started in Seattle, around the churches and the activities, and just thinking about Reverend McKinney and the things that he did as far as housing and working towards black people being able to buy houses outside the red line area. There's a lot of things happened in the churches, were organized and started there. And today, the churches are there, but the communities are not there. So their function as a guard watch for the community is not the same as it was when the community was here. So that's pretty much what the central area looks like now. The central area now is full of apartments, 3 and 4 units, fitted in between houses that we grew up in, and the streets we used to play in. You can't even play in now because they're full of cars. There's nowhere for kids to play. You don't see kids outside playing. The parks are strategically booked for organizations that don't look like us. There's the same Little League fields we played on. You go there now, half the teams you might have a couple of black kids here and there playing, but all the teams are white. And the league itself, I don't even know what league. It's not the International Little League anymore. I don't even know what league, where they come from, but that's what we have. So, I just wanted to say my piece. I'm part of an organization called the Central Area Documentary Project Association. We came together in 2012, and after meeting several times, we decided to start an organization that would sit down and do exactly what we're doing, sit down and interview people and have them tell their story, their experience about coming up in the central area and what it's meant to them, so that we can have this archived and put into history so we won't be forgotten. So when you drive down 23rd Jackson or 23rd and Union, you will be able to see where there was a thriving community at one time of black-owned businesses and organizations that thrived in the central area of Seattle. So I want to thank you for this time, and hopefully one day somebody sees this and gets a little bit of history from it. And if we ever talk about creating community again, you know, these are some of the things I think we have to look at, some of the things that we had in the past to be able to create community today. Thank you.